Okay, guys, if you don't have the Avia or something more substantial for testing your home theater setup and even your 2 channels, you can go on to Tidal, and in Roon I brought up Focal Tool CD, and this is a pretty good uh, CD to use to test. Similar things that we already test, left and right channel, you can test that real easy. Pink noise is that ball right in the middle, and how centered is it? How tight is that ball? Or any frequencies out of the range? Oop, this thing was playing by mistake. Um, Polarity test, just like I had showed you, a lot of out of phase, in phase, it'll tell you back and forth. Get to know what that sounds like. So these three gives you some basic tests you should run after you do any major system change. Um, and certainly for new rooms, anything you're doing for the first time, setting up new speakers, do all these tests. Not so much fond of these subwoofer tracks because you don't really know what the reference sounds like. The walking cello, a walking bass would have been better, but yeah, this is good for realism if you know what a cello sounds like. So you could do that. But otherwise, the main thing you're going to use this for, though, is getting up to speed with what each tone sounds like. And then you're going to do this. What I recommend doing is playing each tone on your own and kind of judging how your system and your room is responding to each of those tones. Does one or two stand out? Do one or two sound really light compared to the others? Make a note of those because the huge dips and the huge peaks are what usually cause the most annoyance with people. Obviously, you're going to want it as flat as possible, but there's a few tricks I'm going to show you in a second. The other thing you're going to do is take out your SPL meter that I told you is kind of worthless once you really get experience, but early on, I think this is a valuable tool, and I'll still use it every once in a while to benchmark myself. Go ahead and see what you thought was the high, peak areas and the low areas, and benchmark every frequency that you see on the screen with your SPL meter and see how you match up with it. Does that mean the SPL meter is wrong in everything you chose? No. Does it mean it's right? No. But you're going to have to come to some kind of um, accommodation for your own preferences and your own ears to what your SPL meters and any measurements say. I want to do a test for you right now. Like, let's just play. I want you to go on to Focal Tool CD and play something like 1.25 hertz. You hear how that sounds? Okay, while that's playing for the length of time, I want you to cup your ears or turn your head just slightly one way to the other, and you will hear usually a dramatic change just from cupping your ears, kind of turning your ears into a reverse horn, or turning your head a little bit. So let's talk about that for a second. Okay, so when you're doing these frequency tests, your ears are in locations that are different from, as I mentioned before, this sensor. I mean, you can put it right at your nose or one ear or the other, and there won't be huge differences, but there will be differences. And I will let you prove it to yourself. Just when you're listening to those tones, like I just heard, cup one of your ears or cup both of them, and notice how different it is. So extrapolate that test. If your ears are designed different than other people or curved differently, that's going to change your impression of those notes. So there is a subjective element to even a frequency response. So what you want to do is be cognizant of what the meter says in empirical terms and close to your ears so that you kind of can get a gauge. And like I said, bass frequencies are going to sound to your ear a lot lower than the higher frequencies just because our ears are sensitive. So you have to factor in this. There's no way for me to kind of teach you everything that you're going to have to find some of these things out on your own, and I'm going to show you how to find it out on your own in a second when I turn the camera back. But cup your ears when you're listening to these, turn your head left and right, realize that this sensor's never in the same spot as your ears or can replicate two ears. and the head shadow effect and all kinds of things when you're measuring like this. Okay, so we covered going through the various tests, going through the various frequencies, using the Spl meter as well as your ears to kind of condition yourself to which one is right or not. We haven't been able to determine yet, but let's just see where you are. Then what I want you to do is go into the DSP, which I covered in another video. Go in here and start playing with the parametric EQ. I've got a bunch of little things I did here. You can add another one. Try a bunch of things based on what you heard, what frequencies you would like to bring down, which ones you'd like to bring up. Again, some of these filter types you can adjust. So this one you're going to want to be, most of the time you're going to use, as I've said in that other video, peak, because you can control each side of things, and you can control the Q, which is the spread of the frequency. So if you heard peaks from 125 to 250, you might want a wide reduction in that area. Let's turn this one off. Whereas if you just heard a single at 125, you may want to just do a narrow. Lots of times you'll see a real peak at 125, but then you'll have a suck out at 100, just the way rooms work or your setup is. So you might have to do a little bit of a boost here. Now again, like I said in the other one, if you're going to boost, bring everything down and boost so that you never go above 0 dB. But let's just do that real quick to show you. I can make this, I can put a boost at 100 dB, around 100, and then I can also control that. You know, do I want to do everything behind it or just that narrow range? And you can see how powerful that is. Let me go back to the test one that I did for you already. You can see where I've done peaks, valleys, different Qs to show how I can adjust. And once you do this, you can go back to your frequency here, and play it and see if you can measure and hear the difference. But more importantly, this is when you go to your playlist. Start playing songs with these EQ corrections and hear just how much better or worse it sounds. In most cases, if you're tailoring this to your ears and to making it more balanced per the Spl meter, you will be hearing things better by making what in audiophile world usually is categorized as taboo to go into EQ. But like I said, do it yourself and you'll start realizing that some changes you make are good, some changes you make are bad. And you can be very tactile with what you do. It doesn't require huge dips. Again, this is zoomed in. You can zoom in to make it seem bigger. Usually I would stick with no more than 6 dB at most, maybe 9. And definitely for adding, I wouldn't go any more than 3 dB. Just as a general rule, there's always going to be exceptions. But this is what I'd be very tactile, because you will start hearing, you'll move this just a little bit or just a little bit here, and then you'll play your same song over. And if they have enough frequency material in that area, you'll be able to notice the difference. And that's when you're really getting to a new level of listening, when you can start hearing these minor changes that you're making and how it makes to the entire frequency balance. Because when you change this, it changes the whole tonal balance of everything playing. Because of harmonics, you're not just listening to single tones anymore. You take this out of somebody's voice, it's going to change the whole harmonic structure of it. So little changes go a long way. So be very tactile with it and subtle at first until you can get, and it's going to be aggravating. You're going to make some mistakes that make things worse. And it may take you a month of going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and activating 2, 3 more of these, you know, to get it to where you want. But all of this will be part of your 10,000 hours of education of getting you better equipped to know what controls sound and how powerful this parametric EQ is. I mean, anybody not using it or something like Dirac or some other kind of room correction, is really missing out. And I prefer this kind of control. I don't mind using Dirac. I use Dirac for some corrections, but especially the impulse response. But here is where I like to do like the fine tuning, because like I showed you, when you cup your ears and different things, it comes down to a personal preference. And usually humans like 1 dB per octave higher in bass. So, you know, your curve, even what Dirac normally recommends in their proposed curves, are usually something, you know, tailored like this, a little bit more bass, you know, per octave. I'm not doing a good job of showing it here, but anyway, kind of a gradual slope. So hopefully this is helpful. It's going to be frustrating, I know. Just don't hate me for it. But once you get something dialed in that you really like, and just keep the things that you want and don't, you know, get rid of the other ones. The other thing you can do is save and load EQ. So here you can see how many EQs. I did this by like dates. Every day I would finish with a new date, a new curve per date, and I would just save it by that date. And sometimes I do multiple ones on that date. And that way I could always go back. If I made a mistake, I can always go back to how I liked it before. Okay, and then I would do it even by certain songs. Okay, I would do some and see, okay, this one made this song good, but is it good enough for a universal correction? You know, yes or no. And then I would do some post-Dirac, you know, you can save as much as you want here in terms of your different EQs and reload them. You can use more than one if these are not enough bands, but you know, I usually think you can get away with just one. So hopefully this is helpful. I will continue with more stuff down the road, but if you can nail down the Avia setup and all the calibration issues, and then get yourself up to speed on your parametric EQ using the Untitled CD, you're going to be 90% of the way there. And the next thing I'm going to do is start going through the critical listening book that I mentioned to start.